Well, welcome everybody. And I know folks are still trickling in. Appreciate everyone that's able to join us during your lunch hour. Welcome to today's webinar, A Place for Knowledge Exchange. This speaker series is co-hosted by the College of Indigenous Studies and the International Arctic Research Center to showcase collaborative approaches to research, education, and real-life community-based practices in rural Alaska. This is a monthly speaker series, and our next event is going to be October 15th, focusing on the topic of salmon. We hope you could join us for that next month, so stay tuned for more information on that. We have some amazing facilitators here that help put this on, and others behind the scenes that do the logistics with Zoom and support the work of the team. We have Josie Sam, Arlo Davis, Yoko Kugo, and myself, Sandra Roach. And there's our bios there for our contact and information. And we always want to start with the land acknowledgement. In respect to the Indigenous peoples before us and in now the physical space we share at UAF, we'd like to start this webinar with a land acknowledgement. Everywhere we live and work is Native land. We recognize, appreciate, and honor Indigenous peoples and their past, present, and future land stewardship. We are committed to building long-term reciprocal relationships with Indigenous organizations and knowledge holders to create relevant and actionable information in support of their sovereignty and self-determination. Today's speakers will talk about how the work done through the project Wildfire My Community highlights collaboration between communities, classroom educators, tribes, and the university research and scientist teams. Today's presenters include Malinda Chase, Hilary Shook, Elena Sparrow, and Katie Spellman. Their respective titles are shown on the screen, but we'll also share their full bios in the chat as they present. We're so excited to hear from them. And as a reminder, first part of our webinar is hearing from our speakers, and the second part is for answering any questions you might have. You can put them into the chat there for our panelists. And before we start, please note that our webinar is being recorded and will be available for viewing later at the CIS YouTube page. You can utilize the Q&A, and our facilitators and speakers will help answer any questions you have. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Katie to share her screen and to get started with our panelists. Thank you all.
Hey, I'm Katie Spellman. Thanks for showing up today. We're curious why you showed up today. If in the chat you might put like, why did you come to this? Are you interested in the topic of wildfire? Are you interested in workshop design? Are you interested? Do you just like go to every talk that Malinda Chase gives? What was your what was your motivation for showing up to this talk today? Put it in the chat, and then we'll try to make sure that we satisfy your motivation by the end of this talk too, if we can. So we are gonna chat today about a workshop that we put together collaboratively across Association of Interior Native Educators Globe, the Fire Science Consortium, GINA, which is the Geographic Information Network of Alaska, our Arctic Earth Science Project, and then our evaluators, the Goldstream Group. And we we're in our 10th year of a project called the Arctic and Earth Science Project, STEM Integrating Globe and NASA. And Elena, do you want to kick us off with the big idea behind our mother project?
So the big idea is to use multiple knowledge systems in learning about the environment to help communities address climate change issues, because you know that here in Alaska, we are ground zero for that. And so we're wanting to use that. And so we co-developed with the Association of Interior Native Educators and braiding this knowledge system. And mainstream science is global learning and observations to benefit the environment program in NASA. and then local knowledge and elder knowledge to make STEM learning locally relevant, culturally responsive, and sustaining, and have an impact. And so just briefly on this learning framework, we start by listening and learning from elders and long-term residents and scientists about the science and the impacts of climate change. And then we discover what youth and adults know and what they might identify as key issues or regarding climate change in their communities, because we invite teams of educators and community members to attend our workshop, such as we did with this Wildfire and My Community. And then they do culturally responsive activities to establish knowledge base and talk with with the NASA scientists. We usually have what we call meet a scientist or a subject matter expert, and it could be a NASA scientist that is in from outside or within Alaska. And actually, we also have subject matter experts from the indigenous knowledge holders. And then do the experimental design and making sense of the research, and again trying to use different methods so they are able to observe locally and then can connect regionally through NASA data and other data, satellite data, and NASA resources, and then incorporating that in a stewardship project that is relevant to their communities.
Thanks, Elena. We follow this learning model as we're designing most of the learning experiences in our project, including the workshops, and then the way that when we go into classrooms and work with any sort of group of learners in general, including ourselves, we start using with listening and following this sort of learning framework. So when we chose our theme, we've been choosing different climate themes over the past 5 years. And we've had energy and food security, and we chose our theme wildfire this year. And immediately we called up Hilary Shook from the Alaskan Fire Science Consortium. And we're like, hey, we think that there would be some cool collaboration opportunities. And we came up with our grounding learning goals for this workshop. So teams, as Elena said, teams of educators, community decision makers, and in some cases, youth who were primarily in the role of the IGAP, it's now called GAP, the environmental coordinator positions for their tribes. Many of them are in their early 20s, and so they're youth to us, and probably in that in-between phase between early career professional and student still. And they come as a team, and through our workshop, we sought to, number one, just increase all of our understanding. Oh gosh, the little emojis are popping up when I do the thumbs up. I keep my hand still. Increase the understanding of wildfire and climate through multiple knowledge systems and approaches. And as Elena said, just like in all of our work, we try to make sure that Indigenous knowledge from Alaskans is represented first and foremost, and value systems that align with the communities themselves. And then we use lots of different approaches from local to global in the teaching, from what do you see and what's in your memory and in your stories to what does NASA see from their satellites. The second goal was to enhance all of our abilities to contribute to the science and the problem solving on wildfire in our communities, specifically with youth engagement in mind as you're designing our collective or building our collective ability to contribute. And then the third, and we really thank Hilary for bringing this aspect as a person who has worked in wildfire for a long time. We wanted to increase our collective awareness of the workforce opportunities in wildfire research, planning, and response. Today's talk, we're going to have 4 different perspectives represented from the 4 of the major partners of the workshop. We're going to start with the Globe Alaska perspective. Globe is global learning and observations to benefit the environment. And Elena started the Alaska chapter in 1996. And so Elena's been running workshops like this for a very long time, but always excited about new partners and new learning. Then we'll hear from Malinda Chase from the Association of Interior Native Educators, who brings the cultural connection and centering of community knowledge into the workshop, among many other things. And then the Alaska Fire Science Consortium really brought the perspective from multiple angles on wildfire. And then each community team themselves brought perspective and experience from their own local communities. So Santa, who happens to be hosting today, was at this workshop and brought a team with an educator herself and the IGAP coordinator, the environmental coordinator from their community. So Santa will share her perspective from a community team. We're going to just show what we did in the workshop, and then we'll hear from those 4 perspectives. So we start our workshops in that same model, learning from elders. Malinda will share a little bit more about who our special elder guest was. We ground each day in Indigenous values from interior Alaska and beyond, and really try to root what we're doing in those values. And then a lot of workshops, offered by UAF, you're like, take the angle of like, oh, people are coming to learn, right? And the empty vessel model of education. And we really try to honor and build together off of the knowledge we were already collectively bringing. So this is a team from Igiagig that came, and they were sharing their work that they've already done on wildfire with the whole group. We try to also just learn the science facts together as a group of geeks interested in this topic. We all come together and wanted to learn more, and we particularly drew on the Alaska's Changing Wildfire Environment booklet that Hilary will mention. We learned from experts such as Mr. Christ here, who's the incident meteorologist from the National Weather Service, and Mr. Slaughter here from the Alaska Fire Service, BLM, right, Hilary? Yeah. Who's done decades of work in fire management and science. We then actually do training in how you might contribute to the science with youth in your community, and we do training in methods that Globe uses. We also did training in the data tools available for communities to access information on the fuels around your wildfire burnable fuels around your community, or like the directionality of the wind. Like how do you get and access all that information? Gina offered that training. And then we took a forward-looking approach and offered a fuel break planning workshop in collaboration with a project based at UAF and the Northern Arizona University called Fuel Breaks with Benefits. And we planned out how we could reduce risk in our community while also planning for things that your community cares about, like berries or food plants or chaga, or whatever you would imagine, recreation. And then finally, we provided structured time to plan a community project, as Elena described, that number one, and these were the three kind of check boxes that you had to do. It has to include Globe in some way. It had to be a project that contributed toward community priorities, and it had to engage youth. And so each of the teams that came ended up making a plan of what they might do in their community related to wildfire. And we just on Monday heard the starts of those projects. So now we're going to hear from each of the partners that were a part of this workshop, and they're each going to answer these 3 questions. Who are you as your organization or partner? What did you come with yourself to the workshop with? What did you bring? And then what did you learn or get from the workshop in this unique partnership? So we'll start with Elena and the GLOBE program.
So this GLOBE program, Global Learning Observations to Benefit the Environment, is in 127 countries. Which started in 1994, and our Alaska GLOBE program started here in 1996. And now we have leadership of this GLOBE partnership through the University of Alaska Fairbanks, and so IARC and Gina. Christy Buffington has been very much involved, and she is part of our Alaska GLOBE partnership here, as well as part of the GLOBE Implementation Office. And so what did we bring to this workshop? The methods for monitoring many aspects of the environment that is youth and community member friendly. That's one thing with the GLOBE program. It is a way of engaging youth in learning science by actually doing science, making observations, designing experiments. And so there are many standardized methods of studying, whether it's the atmosphere, the air temperature, the types of precipitation, whether it's rain or snow, and the biosphere, the hydrosphere, and all that is available, including the cryosphere, because we also have the what is shown in this picture is the frost tube, so that we can determine the depth of freezing of soils that seasonally freeze. And for here in Alaska, it's the depth of soil freezing that's in the active layer above the permafrost underlain soils and terrain. And so, and these different types of methods can be used by communities and students in the classroom to use in their own studies or investigations for, and then we also have provide geospatial tools for sharing and viewing the data. So going from the local observations to regional and global. And then what did we learn? Well, these new collaborations with the Alaska Fire Science Consortium and GINA, the Geographic Information Network of Alaska, and the National Weather Service. We had fits and starts, but then this really brought together these other entities, and it sounds like it's continuing. And then we learned about the unique interest for communities in tundra regions, because here we were offering the wildfire workshop, but we are situated in boreal forest. But they came to share what they knew and also wanted to learn more that they might be able to apply in their regions. And then, of course, one of the mainstays and characteristics of our workshops is to develop new trusting relationships with the teams of educators and community members. And in fact, we're continuing this relationship. We had our first project check-in this past Monday, and there were projects starting already. And the partnerships in this workshop increased our understanding of the work opportunities available in fire science, which we always want to encourage, because the students are interested not only in learning science, but how they apply it and on a career path or a workforce development. And the other important thing that we learned from this workshop is the undergraduate and graduate student engagement, how they have been wanting to learn how to work with communities in the Arctic, communities here in Alaska, and how to do it better than what has been done in the past, where they come and go without consulting and working with the communities that they are doing their research.
Yeah. This student, Cooper, he's one of my UAF students here, and he left the workshop saying, I think I need to get my red card. So, and Hilary can tell you what that means, but I was like, oh, wait, you said you were going to be a scientist. There's no reason he can't be a wildland firefighter and a scientist, right, Hilary? All right, we are going to pass it next to Malinda Chase, the Executive Director of the Association of Interior Native Educators.
Thank you, Katie, and good to see everybody here this afternoon. I see many familiar names there, and of course, I'm always happy to be here with this team. Many of you may not know that I also, in addition, that I'm the director of the Association of Interior Native Educators. It's one of the hats that I wear. I've been wearing it for a very long time, since 2006, which is a small Indigenous Native nonprofit formed to really provide a voice for our Native educators for their own professional development, but also to advocate and support Alaska Native education. There were several Native Educators Association in the 90s and early 2000s, but I know that ours has persevered, even though it's struggled to keep going at times, being a small nonprofit. But partnerships like this make a huge difference for some of the work that our educators feel is important in the classroom. So I also wear another hat, and many of you know, because I see you here, that I am a tribal liaison at the Alaska Climate Adaptation Science Center, where I know some of you. So these two positions heavily inform each other. And in terms of what AINE brings to this workshop, AINE was based in response to our primarily interior elders, Dene, our Athabascan elders, approaching our educators many, many years ago, about the same time that Globe had started in 1995, 96. So it's really interesting to have this long-term engagement with Elena and Katie and on this project, and knowing that the Globe and AINE started about the same time. We have a model that really is the basis for that learning model, where we ground our first learning in our own knowledge system. And in the mid 90s, that was many places around the region were developing cultural curriculum and trying to get some of our own knowledge documented for formal classroom learning and informal learning. So we usually always seek to have an elder or cultural expertise in the workshop or in the learning environment. And this year we were able to invite and have Bobby Solomon, who's from Fort Yukon. And actually Katie was really instrumental in identifying him. I think they were on the same flight in from Fort Yukon or something along those lines. But he was a lifelong, or is a lifelong, wildland firefighter since retired, but has a wealth of knowledge. And so it was a little bit of a pivot, and I'll talk about that a little bit more in a moment, from some of the elders that we've had in the past that brought in a real strong cultural component. His professional ability in terms of wildland firefighting was very evident through the course of the week, and prompted us to think a lot about that workforce development and some of the skills. The other thing that we did was we highlighted a curriculum that we have been working on over the course of this project. And there's we wanted to share that out. There is a lesson as part of that curriculum unit on firewood and the use of firewood and understanding the carbon system. But wanted to share that out with some of the educators because it involves both utilizing a globe approach, but also, really grounding it in curriculum with the model that Katie highlighted there. So these are some pictures. Of course, there's Bobby on the left, and then our team, part of our team was Shageluk, and that's the Shageluk team there. So Santa's there with her mom, who's the longest globe educator that has been using it in the classroom, and she really brought us a huge source of knowledge and input with application in the classroom. And they're both members of AINE. So what did we learn or get from the workshop as partners? One of the things that this project, as I mentioned earlier, allows AINE to do is partner with a much broader and big institution that has both, convening power in the area of science, but also, and the expertise, of course, with climate science, but it allows us to, to explore areas that we might not have the full capacity for, or that people from our communities are interested in. What it was very clear to me was that in involving Bobby Solomon, and then our community teams that came in who were some of them already working on wildfire, or they remembered some of the efforts that elders did in their own community. It really elevated the expertise that we have at the local level and the experience with wildland fire and firefighting. So again, we're all collective learners in this kind of workshop and gathering. And that people like Bobby or other folks who've worked in wildland fires, or perhaps even know our cultural knowledge around wildland fires, are, an excellent resource for educating all the community members. Like when you're thinking about, maybe developing a community wildfire protection plan, or, looking at preparations for the impact of wildland fires in the case of emergency. So that was really evident. And how do we consider that when we don't know the state of our declining federal resources, or if we have an increase in fire and our wildland fire folks, firefighters, are spread really thin, which has definitely been the case. We heard some of that this summer. Then the other thing is, the consortium that serves Alaska, and how services happens and is provided in wildland fire is complex, right? It's a consortium of people. They have to respond quickly. And hearing about how that works, I think, was very useful in terms of both, community preparation, and then how do you bring along young people to potentially fill some of that workforce, and then how do you access online tools? So thinking about how that works both for the individual level in the community, but also the collective community level, and then what's our role in helping communities to access and to understand that as we have such changes happening across Alaska. And the other thing I just want to end with is, listening to, well, two things. Listening to Bobby talk about his expertise. It brought a lot of pride in the room about what he knew, right? And it really exemplified, sometimes you don't know the level of depth. He shared about how people really watch out for each other, build a sense of community, and really, and have an impact too about some of the policy for safety that's needed out there on the fire line. And then I just want to highlight, we had one participant here from Gullivan on the left side, and she shared that that elders used to clear the grass in their community to help alleviate, impacts of fire. And this was along the coast. So anyhow, thank you.
Yeah. Thanks, Melinda. As you're thinking, if something that one of the panelists says is sparking your interest and your questions, put them in the chat and we'll come back to it after our fourth perspective. So for a third perspective, we have Hilary Shook from Alaska Fire Science Consortium. And it was very, very wonderful to get to work with Hilary and the AFSC this year on this project.
Thank you, Katie, and definitely appreciate the props. It certainly was a pleasure for me as well, and was a very eye-opening kind of emotional experience. For folks who aren't familiar with the Alaska Fire Science Consortium, we are one of 15 in the nation. We're part of a Fire Science Exchange Network hosted by the Joint Fire Science Program. It is funded by the Department of Interior and the USDA, and then some of the other consortiums, you get funding in other places. And we are housed at IARC, and we have a great website that is hosted by Frame. So for folks who want to learn more about us, I can put our link in the chat later. And to talk a little bit about what we do, as you can see on the screen, we really try to act as a portal and as a bridge for scientists and wildland fire managers. I'll talk later about some other opportunities that I hope to kind of elevate the work that we do here in Alaska, but we really are trying to bridge the gap in Arctic fire science delivery, outreach, and application. And this event, I think, was a really good start to how we can do better than what we've been doing, though I think we've done well in the past. What did we bring to the workshop? One of the things that we did is a wildfire walk tour, which you saw a couple scenes from in some of the other photographs, but just off of Yankovich Road is the Yankovich Road fire that happened in 2021. And so we took all the students out there and just talked about the fire cycle in Alaska, changes that we're seeing due to climate change. We talked a lot about just the ecosystem here in the boreal, and then also during that experience learned a lot about what we don't know about fire and tundra, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later too. I think the other thing that I brought was just my experience as a dispatch coordinator. I worked in dispatch and did some firefighting. I was able to help share a little bit about different opportunities. Of course, being a wildland firefighter, as Bobby brought that really important information forward, I think I was able to share a little bit more about different opportunities that exist, including in research, mapping, safety. There's just such a breadth of resources that are used to support firefighters in the field. And I think that helped make it seem maybe, I don't know, more available to people who aren't necessarily wanting to be on a crew, but still want to participate and help their community deal with these changes that are coming forth. And then the other was just sharing information and building relationships. There was just such a wonderful group of people here. And we can go to the next slide. So what did we learn or get from the workshop? For me personally, it was really incredible. Katie Spellman actually brought forth the idea of doing a lesson plan. And so we co-developed that with folks from Globe and Heather McFarland, who is our communication specialist at AFSC. And we now have this beautiful lesson plan that's been really well received. It's only been out not even a month, I think. And we've got 3 tours scheduled because of it. And I'm super excited to get this information to our youth. I think the earlier that people learn about wildfire, the less scary it is for them and the more proactive that they can be when they think about everything from how they manage their homes to what their future is going to look like, and hopefully a career in wildland fire. It also helped me improve the wildfire walk tour, just generally speaking. I think sometimes I get too focused in where my background is from, and it really helped me broaden that perspective. Just coming from the wildland fire management perspective, there's a lot more to talk about. And then there's lots of new collaborative opportunities, and that especially, this happened to coincide with a workforce development effort that was going on with another PI, and is moving in. There's other financial opportunities that are coming forward for some of the scientists at the university. And this has really helped me think differently about how we should look at tundra communities where research in fire has maybe been underrepresented, but seems to be something that is going to be coming more prevalent in the future. And so I'm looking forward to exploring those opportunities with other folks. And as I said, just broadening the types of communities that we serve. I think the more that we can connect with youth in our communities, if AFSC has that opportunity to bridge other gaps besides the gap between science and wildland fire managers, I think there's an opportunity maybe to then also include local communities and to help wildland fire managers engage communities better. I think, Malinda, you kind of indicated that there maybe wasn't a lot of understanding about how decisions are made at that level. You know, what is the role of a jurisdictional fire manager versus a suppression fire manager who gets input into those fire plans? And so hopefully there's an opportunity for our organization to help bridge those gaps. And then, yeah, I think that pretty much covers it. Thank you, Katie.
Yeah, thanks, Hilary. I learned so much from you. All right, last but not least, and Santa did not invite herself to talk. I just want to be clear. Santa invited us to talk, and then I was like, Santa, we were all like, you gotta represent your community team too. So Santa.
Well, I seen my name in here and I was like, I guess I gotta fill it in, on the slide deck. So I'm more than happy to share a little bit about who we are and our involvement, which is, like you mentioned earlier, pretty remarkable to have my mom on the team for so many years as a Globe educator, but really the monitoring that's been done on an existing burn site of 20 years of data. And so she's presenting right there, and what she's sharing is basically the time frame of that fire in 2005. So they just did a 20-year little celebration on the burn site last week, and leave it to them to have a campfire on the burn site. And so they roasted marshmallows and did some other activities. So super fun. But I should mention also the team includes Antonia Deacon, myself, my mom, but others. One of the things that's really cool about this stage as a community is on our tribal council, most all have been former Globe students. So they've been involved in data collection, the purpose, their involvement in it, responsibility, civic science. Just really cool to have that kind of already as a base for our decision-making processes as a tribe. So I think I mentioned all those key pieces and just that overview. And just to say, before we go to the next slide, just the importance of that kind of weaving together, and I put it in the chat, but really all that data has been at the school, and we have this ready and able tribal council and community. How do we connect that, and how do we connect with the scientists as well? Like, we all know of each other, right, in terms of systems, but how do we integrate and make these decisions together that help the community overall, which was kind of mentioned throughout the presentations earlier. You can go to the next slide. So just to add a little bit, this was an amazing event, and the team here are really experts in just that ability to bring in key groups, elders, scientists, community leaders. And for us as a community, we're really looking at how to plan for the fire breaks, the importance of the fire breaks, any other community-based decisions that have to happen, and then how to access data. So we looked at a lot of geospatial mapping, historic data, just having really good discussions. And I feel like that is a big piece of this relationship building, but opportunities also to really talk about it, and you know, take a step back as a community, that's important, and to analyze the pieces and to know how they go together. When you're looking at response, when you're looking at resources, when you're looking at key contacts of people, industry, scientists, things that we've covered. And then my final piece to add is really this realization to us on how to tell our story, not only for our own benefit as a community, and acknowledging, like, you know, this story of the burn site and its significance in data, but also you know, sharing that story outwards about the importance of lands, preparedness, community response, and that type of work, and the partnerships, really sharing the story about the partnerships. So kudos to this team for supporting that work for so many years. As soon as that lightning struck the burn site, they were collecting, I think maybe the next, you know, after it was put out, the next day or so, like collecting data. So just re-emphasizing the importance of this project and what we want to do. If you guys didn't get a chance ever yet to look at the burn site outside of in Fairbanks, and maybe someone could put in the chat where that's at. We want to have a really cool, like, educational tour and signage for students and people to go visit the site that's a little more protected in that way, and fun and engaging for learners. So that's all I have to share. I'll turn it back over to you, Katie.
Cool. Thank you, Santa. And then we just wanted to share you a snapshot of course, we evaluate whether or not we met our learning goals that we stated at the beginning of the workshop. And Goldstream Group delivered yesterday. We were like, we're giving a presentation. Could you get us some evaluation results from our workshop? And they delivered it yesterday with perfect timing. The workshop participants, so just on how to read these figures, they have the pre-Likert scale and then the post-Likert scale responses of all the participants. So these are the means, and a score of 1 means that they strongly disagreed with the statement, and a score of 5 means that they strongly agreed. And so we had, you know, these are some of the stated goals of the workshop. And the two that really stood out were the gain in knowledge. You see those two big, let me put the mouse, two really big gains where people came in with a lot less knowledge, were how to actually go out and get the data, like the students in Shageluk have been doing for those 20 years. How do you go out and get data on your fuel loads, on the impacts of wildfire to permafrost or berries or something like that? So people really changed in their knowledge of how to actually contribute to the science. The other thing that really changed was how to use the tools available to plan for problem solving. And that was a second largest gain of how do you use the tools that are out there to make a plan and problem solve on this issue of wildfire for our communities. Elena is going to cover this last bit of evaluation outcomes. If you can unmute, Elena.
Sorry, I was too excited about the results that. So this one on how workshop participants gain knowledge of the impacts of wildfire from different worldviews and perspectives. And the biggest gain is from learning from using traditional ecological knowledge. And it is exciting when we are able to access and actually apply in the learning multiple knowledge systems. And that's what Globe was lacking when I first brought it to Alaska. But then slowly, as I learned how to, as I partnered with many people and organizations to bring the other multiple perspectives. And of course, one of the biggest increases in my own knowledge is when we partnered with the Association of Interior Native Educators. I also want to emphasize how Sonta herself is an example of this melding of knowledge. She was a Globe student and then used Globe in her teaching when she was a teacher teaching, and now she's a professor here at the University of Alaska Fairbanks. And her mention of the tribal members who are mostly all Globe former Globe students is helping them, and of course they have never left their indigenous knowledge system, and it's the melding of the two that seems to be, you know, able to help them more with the decision making. Yes.
And I think what surprises me about this is, you know, you expect a large change. A lot of our teacher workshops are primarily, you know, teachers from the lower 48 that are coming to learn about like how you might do Indigenous knowledge and Western science together. But this workshop was more than 50% Alaska Native participants. So it just goes to show how in Alaska, we've really siloed wildfire education into the Western science paradigm. And so even coming from an Indigenous community and being an Indigenous student or teacher yourself doesn't necessarily mean that you've been thinking about it from other perspectives, from your own cultural perspective or what. Yeah, this was a really exciting result to me, because it wasn't just teachers from the lower 48 submitting these responses. So we're gonna stop there and open up for questions, and let's go back and read through. Oh, we got Santa post in the bios, and yeah, so we'll open for conversation or questions. Anything stand out to you as you listen to the different perspectives in this fun and fruitful collaboration?
And I think folks can unmute too. So if anyone wanted to take the mic,
Yeah.
do that.
Bill, do you mind if I call you out? Since I see your name on here twice. The group from Iyagi, it was so good to hear from your team, Bill, there, and the team that you are on. It was so good to hear all the things that your community has been doing on wildfire prevention. And yeah, is there anything that you wanted to highlight on the partnerships that you've been building there?
Yeah, thanks for hosting this series and recording it. I shared it out amongst a lot of tribal leadership within the Lakes region here in Bristol Bay, and we'll certainly share out the recorded link here too. I know that we had, I think, 3 representatives attend this workshop. One of them was an educator in the community at the time. Another one was an elder, and the final individual was a young woman who grew up in community and is now working as she's running her own fishing guide business and doing all sorts of wonderful things with us in the tribal stewardship office, and attending a lot of these types of workshops. I think that we've been really fortunate to have connections to entities such as UAF and all the work that we've been able to engage in with Malinda Chase here on the call, to help build out more of a stronger climate resilience, I think, dynamic in Iyagik. And what we're certainly striving to do is build this out, not just for the community of Iyagik itself, but for communities at least within the Kvichak watershed. There are several tribal communities there, and we have been working in partnership with Alaska Venture Fund in their more recent development of their wildfire team, who I know folks are probably familiar with on the call here too. And they've been really instrumental also in kind of helping to dedicate a lot of resources towards building capacity for red card training that's dedicated specifically to the Bristol Bay region to rebuild capacity when we think about wildfire preparedness and response, and also putting together pilot workshops. And one that they put together over this past year is something that they called fire gap training. I'm not going to remember what that acronym stands for, but it's clever. And but we hosted their pilot workshop in Yagig, which was really all about meeting the community where they're at in terms of fire preparedness and response, in recognition that it's pretty unrealistic. It's an unrealistic benchmark to expect that our tribal communities are going to be able to attain the certification and maintain that certification to develop a fire department in all of our smaller tribal communities. So the intention there was to kind of assess what equipment we have, what sort of capacity we have, and start to maneuver around that, and acknowledge that there are probably gaps in some of that we can start to fill. But thinking about it in a way that isn't mired in sort of the bureaucratic red tape associated with going through and maintaining a certification process to establish a village fire department, because we recognize that there is turnover, and if and when a fire, whether it's structural or wildland fire, approaches community or is in community members are going to show up and respond regardless of whether or not they have training and the resources to do it. So this type of workshop is really geared towards how do we provide, at least some level of training to assess and ensure that when that happens, we do it in the safest way possible and are a little bit more prepared for the eventuality of wildland fire probably encroaching upon a lot of our communities in Southwest Alaska, at least. Yeah, there's a lot more I could add to that, but we're in the process right now of trying to kind of build out the foundation for a more regional entity that can hold a lot of this work, especially wildland firefighting work. That's called the Nalavana Sustainability Forum, and it's kind of a coalition of tribal leaders within the region, and to house more regional work like this, regional initiatives, instead of having them housed in one individual community.
Yeah, I see Adelheid put a shout out to the Bristol Bay region efforts and the championing by the Alaska Venture Fund. Thanks, Adelheid, for putting that info in the chat. And then your alias, Bill, typed while you were talking that the fire gap stood for Fire Incidents Response, Emergency Guardianship, and Preparedness. So that whoever Bill K number 2 is, thank you.
This is Mary Hostetter. I didn't catch that before I signed on. So sorry, there's
I
two
was
Bills
wondering.
here.
I was wondering who Bill Kane number 2 was.
Who's the second Bill Kane? Oh my gosh.
Hi everybody, thank you for the presentation. It was
awesome. And then Leah, thank you, Leah, for sharing the Fire Gap resource.
Katie, I'd seen that Christine's hand was raised earlier. I wasn't sure.
Yeah, and then she popped off. So
did she? Oh,
yeah,
okay.
I see that Chris wrote. Okay, she said she'll come to us in her office, but she attended because she really wants to connect the education piece to her wildfire expert panel process of the Sustaining Arctic Observing Network that she helps lead. So another connection for us. So very, very cool. Okay.
It has another one in the Q&A too. If the topic community planning efforts came up at the workshop, such as hazard mitigation plans or community wildfire protection plans.
Yeah, definitely. Especially in when we were thinking about our fuel breaks with benefits project, and I know Leah, you're a champion for trying to get a simple process in the state, and it definitely, that need came up time and time again. Hilary, it looks like you had something to add.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, one of the things though that also came forward, depending on where the folks were from, there was a lot of curiosity about wildland fire, but not always like at the absolute forefront of what communities needed to do. So I think the fuel breaks with benefit definitely made things a little bit more tangible for folks and like kind of laid some groundwork, because fire isn't necessarily something that people have always experienced outside of structure fire on a regular basis. Smoke has obviously been a really big impact historically, but I think all signs are pointing to more activity out west. And then I just wondered if I could give another plug for AFSC. We do post a monthly newsletter that can announce a lot of different events and activities. And so if you would ever like us to share anything that's happening in your communities, please go ahead and just send me an email and I can get it in there.
Wonderful. Anything from anybody else? I think we got to all the Q&As in the chat there, but if there's anything else, we have just a couple minutes. Anyone has anything that
I
they
just also, I wanted to circle back to the thought that Elena seeded at the beginning of, you know, when we put out the posters and everything for this workshop, we imagined in our heads that it would be mostly interior Alaska communities or Kenai Peninsula, like those community teams that are really like have been thinking about fire day, you know, every day of the summer. And it really surprised us that so many tundra communities applied and are just like seeking the information and the training. So I think it just points to a need for the tundra fire research and planning and getting prepared for the future of fire on the tundra. So that's directions that we'll head in hopefully as we go. And Shageluk, you're right on that break, the you know, the in-between zone, turning more boreal, and like it's a unique spot for those kids to be studying fuels, and I hope those kids know that.
Yep, for sure. Well, thank you so much, Katie. And then if you guys want to share your emails or anything like that or contact information, feel free. But I just want to share my appreciation to each of you for speaking and sharing space with us. And those of you that had to take time away from your lunch hour, we just enjoyed this time talking about this very important topic and the collaboration that this team does so well and amazingly with community, educators, scientists, elders, youth. Just kudos to you guys. Great job. You can watch the recording on CIS's YouTube page. And then also just stay tuned for the next webinar, which is on the topic of salmon, October 15th. We got a great panel for that as well. So appreciate all of you. Thanks for showing up today. Have a good one.
What a great webinar.
Thank you.
Thanks so
Bye.
much for putting this on. It was wonderful.
Thanks, Chris.
Oh.